Yes, yes, yes. Grace Point, welcome. Welcome, you're finding your way. Let's stand up. You glad to be here today? Oh, wow. Are you glad to be here today? Well, we're so glad that you're here. Every single person walking through these doors, you are loved. It's a safe space to be exactly who you are, and exactly who God made you to be. We're going to sing some songs, hear some great words, and we're going to do this together, all right? Let's do it. If you're lost and you're lonely, go and figure out why. Well, take a trip to your dark side. Go on and have a good cry. 'Cause we're all lonely. Yeah, we're all lonely together, yeah. I want to see your sadness. I want to share your sin. I want to bleed your blood and I want to be let in. 'Cause don't you just, and don't we all just want to be together? Come on, sing it. And leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind, yes. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. If your face is down, we'll take a look around. Do your fingers move? Do your lungs inflate? Are you tired? Are you weary of the hidden hate you've been holding? Yeah. Did you lose that love or have you never found it? Are you feeling sad 'cause you did a bad thing? Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind, oh yeah. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind, oh yeah. Are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? The only way to lose that fearful feeling, replace it with love that's healing. Oh, are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind, oh yes. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. All right, come on, sing it one more time. Leave what's heavy. That's right. What's heavy behind, oh yes. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Yeah, that's good. Y'all sound awesome. Thanks for singing with us. What we'd love for you to do now is to take a few minutes and greet your neighbor, talk to somebody maybe across the room, have a conversation. We'll be back here in a couple minutes, okay? Good. Meet and greet. This is the meet and greet.
Good morning, Grace Point. That was weak. Good morning, Grace Point. Sorry. I'm so glad you're all here. I love this space and this time and the connection that you guys are having with each other. It's just really, really cool. Welcome to Grace Point. My name's Murphy. He, him, are my pronouns. Also want to acknowledge and say hi to our online community. Everybody wave at them. They're right up there at that camera, so wave at the online community. We're really excited and glad that you're with us as well. A couple of quick announcements that we have. First off, QR code. If you've been here anytime, you know we have that everywhere. There are little cards on the chairs that you can connect. Everything I'm going to tell you, you can find at the QR code where it'll take you to on the web. So if you go, what was that he said? You can go find it there. So just scan that and you can find that. So the first thing, GP Kids, we are having Kids Back to School Picnic is next Sunday, the 20th, from 12:30 to 2:30 at Sevier Park. Incredible opportunity to meet other families, win prizes. There will be prizes. So, yeah. Y'all aren't excited about prizes? I mean, so there will be prizes and there'll be food so you can eat together as well. Please email Tiffany at gracepoint.net, and you can RSVP that way. So I was just told that there is a new group. Actually, for now, it's just a chat, a text thread chat, correct? I'm going to say it's a group not yet named because we haven't come up with a good name for it. We were talking about it. It's for folks like me, 55 and older. Unless you are younger than that and you would like to join with the cool kids, you can be a part of that as well. You can see CJ afterwards if you'd like to be a part of that. We don't exactly know where it's going to go, and maybe one of you can have a really great name for this group to going forward. So check with him, and he can get you into the group chat on that. So the August Community Social. August Community Social is an online event on the 27th from 5 to 7 p.m. We're going to be live streaming Derek Webb's house show that we had here in case any of you missed it. It's absolutely 1,000% worth going and seeing again. So I encourage you to check that out on the 27th. Have a live chat going throughout to connect the Nashville community and the online community. That's one of the most important things is that everyone, whether you're 1,000 or 10,000 miles away or you're right here in Nashville, we want everyone to feel and know that they are actually a part of the very heart of Grace Point. So we want to encourage that. The community dreaming sessions that we have. We just had one. It's between the two services. We've got 3 more weeks or 2 more weeks, Ricky? 2 more weeks. So we did today. 1 more week. Okay, 1 more week of that. So next week, we'll have 1 more of those. If you'd like to come and be a part of that and kind of think about the cool things and what kinds of things that Grace Point could be or could become, that's the place to kind of get your input in on that. Yes, sir.
There are 2 online, one this Wednesday and one on the 30th.
You heard it from the man. There's 2 online, one this Wednesday and then the next Wednesday online, so you could absolutely jump in on that as well, right? Grace Point is having the 20th anniversary celebration. Are you excited? It's still pretty weak. You guys haven't had your coffee yet, have you? I'm thinking that's probably what it is. So mark your calendar for Grace Point's 20-year anniversary celebration on Sunday, September the 17th. So you've got about a month away. We'll have special gatherings at our normal times with some familiar faces from the past and the present, a community cookout following the 11 a.m. gathering. There's an RSVP, so please fill that out and let us know that you're coming. So the afterwards, I was telling Ricky earlier, we used to call those community meals after church when I was growing up, dog days, right? Anybody heard that before? Nobody in the first service had ever heard that before. Dog days means dinner on the grounds, D-O-G, dog days. So that's what we're going to do, dog days next week. Not next week, the 20th. I'm not going to overpromise. If it's Josh's fault if I did. So financial support. We are so grateful for anything that you have felt like you would like to be a part of. Any of you who've been a part of supporting this incredible work. It's important work. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Grace Point, it's really, really, really important what we do here, because there are so many people that don't have a space like this, either a virtual space or a space that's here together in person. So anything that you could do to be a part of that financially, it would help, because you can't just do this, without having some kind of, unfortunately, without having some kind of financial support. So you can text any dollar amount to 84321. You can give online at our website, gracepoint.net/give. We've got the QR code, of course, and you can get to all of that. And then we do have the Venmo at GracePoint TN. GracePoint TN. I think that's everything. Thank you very much.
Yay, announcements. We have a couple update. I just want to make sure, announcements-wise. As children, you want to come to the front, and we're going to sit on the carpet. Is that okay with you, Ricky? Like right here? So, oh my gosh, they started just moving all. Yeah, you're right. You're doing the right thing. If you want to come sit up here, we're going to sit on the carpet and get very close. So update-wise, our back to school next week is also for students. So anyone under 12th grade or 12th grade and under. So youth, you will also have prizes that are not child prizes. Trust me, they're pretty great. There will be food. And so this is for anyone in kids and students. We have lots of debates of if we're going to sit down or not. It's okay. Okay, sweet. Are y'all ready? Okay, everyone take a really big breath, really deep. Now let it go. Okay, bring your shoulders all the way down, like wiggle, wiggle, wiggle like crazy. Okay, if you're online and you're sitting at home, you get to do the same thing. Online, it may be a little bit more comfortable, because when you're at home and you're sitting on your couch or your bed and it gets really comfortable. Have you ever fallen asleep sitting there because it's so comfortable? Some of you are like, yes. Some of you have no clue. Just wait when you get older, okay? So today we have lots of participation stuff that we have to do, okay? So today, your job, if you're sitting in the front, your job is to listen to everyone else. And adults in the room, your job is to participate, okay? It's going to be great. Okay, so question for adults, okay? What is something that brings you peace? You do not have to raise your hand, and I'm not going to give you a mic. You can just say it out loud. What's something that brings you peace? The ocean, sleep, music. Anything else? The breeze? Trees, me too. Trees. What else? I hope you are listening. I'm going to ask you questions about it. Okay, so we've had the ocean, trees, music, sleep, money. The end of the workday, which might be like, how you feel at the end of the day of school, and you're like, oh, I don't have to do that again. Okay. Anything else? Cats. Yes, cats. I will also add dogs. My dogs cause me a little bit more anxiety than peace. Okay. Anything else, adults? Coffee. Okay. We need rest as adults. Okay, are you ready? Are you listening? Okay, raise your hand if you can name one thing that they said. What do you have? The ocean, music. Trees? Do you remember one, Jack? Sleep. Anything else? Okay, so all of these things, did they all say the same thing? No. They all said something very, very different, right? Because we're a room full of very, very, very different people. We've been talking about fruits of the Spirit. We've been talking about how the fruit of the Spirit, which means the way we love others, is through love. And we've said joy. And today we're talking about peace, okay? So we're going to try this one time, and then we're going to go back to our lesson, okay? Exactly like that. Okay, crisscross applesauce if you can. Okay, or sit still, sit up really straight and tall. Okay, I want you to relax your shoulders. That means if your shoulders are like this, you go like this. Okay, now this is the weird part, and adults are really bad at this. You're going to relax your jaw. Okay, so a lot of people, they get all stressed and they bite down really hard, which is not good. So I want you to wiggle your mouth around. That sounds weird. I know. Just go like this. There you go. Now I want you to take a deep breath and let it go. And we're going to do it 2 more times, okay? Take a big, deep breath and let it go. Now this time I want you to think of the thing that brings you peace. And it might be trees or an ocean or the end of the day. Or it might be, I don't know, if you drink coffee, you might. Okay? One last deep breath. Breathe in really deep. Think of that thing and let it go. Okay? Awesome. And so today we're going to talk some more about peace and how do we practice peace. And so we have our volunteer, Emily, is going to go to the door. And if y'all will line up behind Emily, the rest of our volunteers are going to join you. And if you are in 5th grade and below, you can go ahead and go up to the door. And we'll get started. So go line up. Go.
We hope you have an amazing time. Can we say bye to the kids? Bye, kids. I love that. That brought me a lot of peace that I needed. Can we stand up again? I'd love to do that. And let's sing this together. In love alone, the world was made. Dust and divinity dispersed, the fingerprints of God displayed, touching the farthest universe. What eyes could see, what hands could hold, such mystery, such truth untold, no mind could learn, and still we know this is the wonder of God's love. In love alone, we take our breath, drawn from the very source of life, Spirit of God, in bone and flesh, filling our bodies, hearts, and minds. We're not afraid to trust ourselves. There is no shame, no threat of hell. Our souls find rest, for all is well. This is the glory of God's love. In love alone, we will abound. Justice and mercy is our work. Hands in the dirt, feet to the ground, creating heaven here oppression cease. This is the goodness of God's love. We will not place our faith in crowns. We humbly lay our weapons down, for this is where our strength is found. This is the power of God's love. This is the power of God's love. Thank you so much. You can be seated.
Hey, can we thank Ricky and Travis? Ricky, that song is so good. So good. How's everybody doing? All right, maybe we'll try to make that a little better by the end. How about that? I opened 9 o'clock with a very niche joke, which is always a risk. But welcome to this week's edition of Baby Billy Bible Bonkers. If that's a thing, that's just for you. If you know any Righteous Gemstones fans, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, so we're in a series called Rhythm, Spiritual Practices for Progressive Christians. And we're asking the question, like, how do we, as progressive Christians, if that's a thing you identify with, are there still spiritual practices that, if we refrain them from the past, can be helpful? And are there new ones that we could pick up along the way? And we've been exploring that over this series. And today, we're going to look at a real doozy of a practice. But just to remind you, what spiritual practices are about, they're about opening and enlarging the heart, right? It's about opening our heart to God, to ourselves, to our neighbors, to our enemies. It's about expanding our awareness of God, ourselves, our neighbors. It's about an invitation to transformation. And so we're asking, with some traditional practices that we've had for a very long time, and we're also trying to pepper in some that are kind of newer. And today we're going to talk about prayer. Does anybody else feel the need to groan when you hear that word? It just kind of, it's taken on a lot of baggage, hasn't it? It's taken on a lot of discomfort. And I just want to say on the front end, the first part of this sermon is going to be a little cynical. Intentionally so. I'm going to be as cynical as I can possibly be about the whole thing, because I want to then sort of say, okay, yeah, I get all of that, but is there a way for us to approach this a little bit differently? Okay? So let's begin with a word from one of the great theologians of our time, from MC Hammer. We got to pray just to make it today. Do we? Is that real? Is that a thing? Do we got to pray just to make it today? Is MC Hammer right on this? And actually, I don't think Mr. Hammer, just out of respect, I don't think Mr. Hammer is making this up on his own. I actually think he's riffing on and borrowing from a guy named MC Paul, who you'll find wrote some letters in the New Testament. Now, just real quick before we get into this text, I just want to orient you to where we are historically. Most scholars believe 1 Thessalonians is the oldest letter we have of Paul, and that makes it the oldest document in the New Testament. So when you think of like the stuff in the New Testament, it begins with Gospels, right? With stories about Jesus. Those aren't the oldest documents in the New Testament. The oldest Gospel was Mark, which comes second in the New Testament, but Mark, written around the year 70 CE. Paul's letter, 1 Thessalonians, was written probably in the early 50s. So if you're ever at a party and you want to really bring the mood way down, this is some Bible trivia for you, that 1 Thessalonians is probably Paul's oldest letter. Another fun fact, 2 Thessalonians, which is also attributed to Paul, scholars almost universally agree wasn't actually written by Paul. It was written by somebody later, quite a bit later, after Paul had died, in Paul's name, to try to leverage some of Paul's authority. And if you put those two texts side by side, lots of things are different. Language, theology, lots of things are really different. So those are two things to bring down the mood of a party. Now, here's what Paul says while he's winding down this letter to a church in Thessaloniki. He says, rejoice always. Anybody have trouble with that one? Now, can we just say Paul never had to deal with traffic? so he doesn't get to tell us what to do. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances. Again, never dealt with traffic, doesn't get to tell us what to do. Paul never worked with your coworker. Paul never had your boss. And if you're your own boss, that's even more true. Paul never had you for a boss. Give thanks in all circumstances. It seems a bit much. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Like, this is the stuff God wants for you. Rejoice always. That's tough. Pray without ceasing. Anybody got that one down? Now, here's what I thought. I'm going to go and I'm going to dig into this in the original language. We're going to read this in Greek. And I bet what we'll find is what we often find, which is all translations are interpretations, right? And so often you take something that's translated and you go back to the original text and you'll find, some decisions were made here about how to render certain words that actually changes the meaning of the text. And so I dug in and I was wrestling with it. I'm going to figure out how we've misread this all along. It really doesn't mean pray without ceasing, except it actually does. They got this one right. This is actually what Paul wrote, or a scribe wrote, right? But it seems like Paul wrote, pray without ceasing. That just seems tough, doesn't it? Especially if we think of prayer as every head bowed, every eye closed, saying the right words, talking to who? God, someone, trying to say the right things. And if we're supposed to do that all the time without ceasing, you're never going to get anything else done, right? You're not going to brush your teeth. You're not going to be able to get ready. You're not going to drive to work. Nothing else is going to happen because we are staying in this posture all the time. Is that actually what he means? And if I can just be honest and give you a little bit of a disclaimer on the front end, I have always struggled with prayer. Anybody else? I have always struggled with prayer. Like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to get something out of it? Am I supposed to feel something as a result of this? Am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do? Is there a right way? What are the right words? Is there a right time and a right place? Is it like a morning, noon, night thing? Apparently not. And then I bumped up around people all my life who would identify themselves as prayer warriors. What a weird metaphor. We grew up worshiping a violent God, so we need the most violent metaphor for prayer you could possibly come up with, right? Prayer warriors, and they pray all the time about everything. And I remember just listening to them talk about how great they were at prayer, and I just would feel so small. And so, there's something wrong with me spiritually. There's something wrong. I don't love Jesus enough. I don't have enough faith. I don't know what my problem is, but a prayer warrior, I ain't and never have been. It's always been a bit of a slog for me. And here's part of the reason why. Some of the worst, most unhelpful cliches in Christian history are related to prayer. You want examples? Okay, for the three of you, this is going to be fun. Here's the first one. Prayer changes things. What? Prove it. Right? Prove that prayer changes things. Well, I prayed for that parking spot at Walmart and I got it. Well, how do you know prayer changes things? And what does it say if you pray and nothing changes? What do we do with that? We're going to come back to this one. Let go and let God. It's okay to groan audibly. This is akin to Jesus, take the wheel. And I saw this great meme about this. It was like, Jesus lived 2,000 years ago. Cars didn't exist. You don't want him driving. It's a metaphor that breaks down, but it's sort of this abdication of responsibility, right? I'm just going to let go and let God. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to try to make the situation better. I'm not going to do anything. Jesus, take the wheel. And it sounds super spiritual on the front end, but is it ultimately just about abdicating our responsibility to show up in the world and actually do something meaningful? This next one is good too. We need to lift them up in prayer. Imagine somebody who didn't know anything about our language religiously. What would they expect to happen? We need to lift them up in prayer. Somebody comes and sits down on a chair and we hoist them up in the air and we walk around praying for them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if that's what was actually happening in churches all over the country? Just people in chairs levitating all around the room, being lifted up in prayer. And if nobody has to hold you, that's when you're really good at prayer. You're using the force to just lift them up in prayer. Here's another one that is absolutely infuriating. Thoughts and prayers. I think most elected officials have that saved in a note so that when something terrible happens, they can copy and paste that right in, right? Because thoughts and prayers ultimately ends up being some sort of Like, yeah, we'll think about them and we'll pray for them, but we're not actually going to do anything meaningful to change the situation or to deal with the problems. Hello, gun reform. We're not going to do anything meaningful that might actually inconvenience some people or that would actually make the world better. We're just going to sit over here and and I saw another meme. I'm just full of memes. But tots and pears, right? It's the same equivalent. It's like saying, oh yeah, here's some tater tots and a pear. It'll get you the same thing if action isn't behind it. And what often happens with thoughts and prayers is and with let go, let God, that whole thing, it really is, it adds up to a substitute for any meaningful action in the world. And then there's the one like, we need everybody praying. Everybody. There are like 8 billion people on the planet. You're going to miss a couple. You're not going to get everybody. And what does that say about God? Like, is there a quota for the number of, I told you this is cynical, is there a quota for the number of people you have to get praying for? Like is God sitting back somewhere going, I would have stopped the wildfires in Hawaii, but we were too short? And if that's the case, what does it say about God? What kind of God is this that needs a quota? Like, it'd be like me saying, well, unless 3 of my 5 kids ask for something, we're not going to do it. The one kid matters, right? Like the one kid who needs the thing, they matter too. Is there a threshold? Another one is this phrase, I'll pray about it, which is one of the greatest cop-outs in human history, which is when like, hey, I want to ask you, would you be willing to do this? Would you be willing to volunteer to do the thing? Like, you know what? I want to say yes, but let me pray about it, which is code for, God, I don't want to do that, but I'm going to let God disappoint you. It's not going to be me. Anybody, can we just be honest right now? How many of us in this room have used I'll pray about it to get out of something? How many of us are lying right now about not having done it? Yeah, it's one of the greatest cop-outs in human history. Here's another one. God always answers. Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Do not tell that to Mr. Garth Brooks, who has been singing for decades that some of God's greatest gifts are, in fact, unanswered prayers. Right? Does God always answer with a yes or no? I mean, it's kind of convenient that we interpret it that way. Anybody remember prayer chains? And sometimes, let me just pause the cynical for a minute. I think sometimes that is the most well-intended thing. Resume the cynical. Also, it turns into like a den of gossip, right? Like, how do you know, what's going on with sister so-and-so? Well, let me tell you, we need to pray for her because this is what's really going on, right? Like, it's a way to stir the gossip in the community. And then there's this thing that always happened to me. You ever gone to a high school sporting event or any kind of sporting event and they pray beforehand? I used to, in the small town we moved from, I used to do radio for Friday night football games. One of my favorite things. I love doing it. But when they couldn't find somebody to pray, they would ask me because I was a pastor. And then you're the guy who says, no, I would rather not pray, thank you, in a small town that's very religious. It's really awkward. I never could figure out what to pray for. Dear God, may we vanquish our foes. May we beat them mercilessly on the scoreboard. May we make them regret ever having taken up the pigskin. And God, also, may we be really good sports and may nobody get hurt in Jesus' name, amen. Like, what are we, first of all, praying at a high school sporting event, wildly inappropriate. Second, like, what are we praying for here? What are we actually asking for? Is this just a ritual we're doing? We talked about ritual last week. Is this one of those empty rituals we're doing because it makes us feel religious? Makes us feel like we're doing something spiritual? And, that has all made prayer for me always have something that felt a little bit off. It always felt a little bit like we're not actually trying to get closer to God with some of this. We're actually just trying to manipulate God. Anybody ever done the bargain thing where it's like, God, if you give me X, I'll do Y and Z? And so God gets you, this happens. Nobody prays more than when you pass a police car going faster than the speed limit. Suddenly we're all devout, right? And we're all praying, Lord, dear baby Jesus, please do not let me get a ticket. I'm already running late. And I don't think that's an excuse, right? Or you didn't study for the exam and you're like, God, if you let me ace this exam, or at least acing for me would be like a C. If you let me ace this exam, I promise I will be the most devout, faithful person. And God, you pass the exam, but you try a little bit, but let's just be honest, there's going to be more bargaining later, right? I always kind of felt like it's a little bit, like prayer was a little bit showy. Like, why are you praying at a high school football game? Like, why are we, like, meeting around a flagpole, which I'm not sure why that was the ground zero for the prayer, but meeting around and praying and everybody holding hands and being like, I'm so much more spiritual than everybody else. When Jesus actually had teaching that said, if you're going to pray, don't do it in some sort of showy act. Like, go in your room, shut the door, let it be between you and God. And it's like Christians like, I got it. Let's go do it in the most public way possible. The world is our room, right? Like, just this sort of showiness. It's been a substitute for action. Often prayer gets weaponized. You ever had somebody tell you they're praying for you and it did not feel like a good thing? Don't you love it? Like, it happens a lot on social media because people do things on social media they never do in person, where you have a disagreement theologically and they're like, well, I'm going to be praying for you. Please don't. That sounds like a threat. Please don't mobilize your mafia god to come get me because we have different theology. And there was always a bit of shame and guilt. Like, if you were not as good at it as everybody else, there was something deficient in you. Anybody else feel like that? Like, when other people are like, I'm a prayer warrior, you're like, I'm not even a prayer corporal. I don't even know what the other category would be. I'm not a prayer anything. I struggle with prayer. And then, can we just be honest, and you can believe whatever you want, totally. But intervention is problematic. This idea that I prayed and God gave me a parking spot at Walmart. I know people in my life that I love who believe such things happen. I prayed, God gave me a parking spot at Walmart. But, okay, if God has got the spare time to do that, why is God not actually addressing the big problems? Why are we not addressing, like, it seems like God would start with, hey, your planet is dying. So I'm sorry, I'll get you the parking spot next time. I'm trying to reverse climate change, right? Or, hey, I'm sorry, there's this thing called global hunger where lots and lots of people are starving to death. I'm going to go fix that first. Or any of the other epidemics, pandemics that we've experienced. Like, why is God not starting there? Why is God doing sort of the stuff that if you just drive around long enough, somebody's going to move and you'll get one, right? Like, why is it that so intervention for me, and you can believe whatever you want, but intervention for me creates more problems for God than it actually solves. Because why does God get all the credit and none of the blame? If you're going to give God credit for every good thing that happens, then you also have to assign God blame for every bad thing that happens, because that means God did not act in the way God acted over here to fix the problem. Told you it was going to be a little cynical. Now, here's what I want to say. All of that on the table, I still think prayer can be a meaningful practice if we choose to engage it. And I think partly because prayer isn't one thing. Like, we have this, like, prayer is one thing. It's when you close your eyes, fold your hands, say some words, and then you're done. And prayer actually isn't that, I don't think. It can be a small slice maybe of what prayer is, but prayer isn't just one thing. And so I'm going to use the word prayer a lot during this because it's sort of the word. But if it helps you to say meditation, then say meditation. If it helps you to say silent, just having moments to sit and rest in silence, then let that be the language, the metaphor, the verbiage you use. So let's begin with what I think prayer can actually do for us if we're open to it. And I want to begin with, I think prayer is a posture before it's anything else, before it's words, before it's a beginning, middle, and end, before it's something we've memorized or something we've done spontaneously, before it's something contemplative, before it's any of those things. Prayer is first and foremost a posture. It is a way of orienting ourselves to God, if you believe in God. It's a way of orienting ourselves to life, to ourselves, to our neighbors. And it's a way of focusing ourselves, right? Like prayer. So take prayer off. You don't like prayer? Meditation is a posture, right? If you spend time in meditation, the hope is that what that does. Anybody else done the apps where the guy with the English accent is talking to you and just telling you to calm down and let your mind be still, and if something takes you off, just follow it for a second and come right back. And because he's speaking with that accent, you believe everything he's saying because it's just inherently a great accent, right? And what does that do? Like, it brings you to the moment. It brings you to yourself. It brings you to your body. It sort of pauses all. And one of the things they tell you, which I love and appreciate so much, is if you're not very good at this, it's okay. You'll get better, right? Like, so it's this. It brings you to the moment. It brings focus, and it's sort of a posture through which you can begin to experience your own life and your own experiences and your own fears, worries, all of that sort of thing. So I think prayer, to begin with, before it's words, sometimes it's never words. Sometimes prayer has nothing to do with words that are spoken out loud by you or even in your head. Did you ever have the thing growing up when you wondered, like, I know God can hear my thoughts, but can the devil? Like, before it's... Anybody else have that whole thing going on? Like, God and I need a code. I told you we were going to have more fun than you apparently seemed like you were having. Look, here's the thing. I think it begins with just creating space to have a posture that is open. And we don't often get there in life because we are so busy all the time. We talked about busyness. We talked about rest a few weeks ago as a spiritual practice. But we wear busyness, we wear exhaustion in our culture as if it were a badge of honor. As if you were to say to somebody, how are you doing? What's the general response? Hey, good. Things are, just this weather, right? Well, we're so busy. What if somebody said, you know what? I'm sleeping like 10 hours a night. I'm the most rested I've ever been in my entire life. You would never admit that out loud because, number one, everybody would hate you. And number two, you would be afraid people would think you're lazy. You'd be afraid people would think you're not as productive, that you aren't proving yourself, as if you have to prove to God that you're a worthwhile human being. You have to prove to your partner, you have to prove to your neighbor, you have to prove to everybody around you, your boss, you have to prove to everybody that you matter and that you have worth and that you have value. And so we do that by working ourselves silly. And if we aren't doing that, we create new things to do to make ourselves more busy. And so of course we have no sense of posture toward openness. Of course we don't feel like we're disconnected in so many different ways from so many different relationships because it is hard to connect in meaningful ways when you can't stay awake or when you're continually exhausted. So before we start putting things onto prayer, like words, what if it's just what if Paul's pray continually is partly just about, okay, I'm going to try to quiet things. I'm going to take just a moment. And, it's when the people are like, I prayed for 8 hours straight. No, you didn't. But what if we could just pause ourselves just a little bit and to allow in that space for us to just come home to ourselves, come home to our body, come home to where we are, feet on the floor, butt in chair, just allowing ourselves to be present. And I think if we do that, prayer can actually then become a way that helps us to name and be present to our feelings. The things that most of us were taught to repress, deny, avoid, be afraid of. The stuff we carry around with us. Have you ever been asked what you think about or feel about something and you had no idea how to answer it because you'd never asked yourself? How do you feel about this? I have no idea how I feel about that because I've never taken a moment to ask myself how I feel about that. I think prayer, meditation, silence can be a space where we actually can begin to say, what am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm scared to death. Okay, that's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be afraid. Oh, I'm terribly anxious. That's okay. Anxiety does not mean that there's something wrong with you and God. It means that you're probably a human being paying attention to the world and your experience of it. It's okay. Feeling joy, that's okay. But just being able to come home to those feelings and to know what you feel. I think prayer, silence, meditation can calm things down enough, turn the noise down. Here's something I've learned. I am now goes into a restaurant and complains about how loud the volume of the music is years old. That's a very specific threshold you hit, where if you go into a restaurant, at one point you're like, this is awesome, and now you're like, could they just turn it down a little? I can't even hear my friend talk, right? I'm at that specific level of years old. But how often do we turn the volume down so that we can hear what's going on within us? I think most of the time we're spent, sometimes my phone will tell me that my earphones are a little too loud. Hey, you're blasting that way too loud. It's going to harm you in the long run. And I think we live with our volume knob turned way too loud in all sorts of ways. And so prayer, meditation, silence is a way of turning the volume knob down and actually being able to hear. I think it's also, prayer can be an act of solidarity. It can be a way of showing up for other people. Marcus Borg is one of my favorite theologians, and he said, he said, I don't believe God intervenes. Like, I don't believe I ask God to do this and God does this. He said, but I still pray for people all the time. I pray for the people I love because it's the loving thing to do. One of the ways I show love to the people I care about is by remembering them and praying for them. And if in prayer, one of the things that happens is I remember them, and so I remember what they're going through, and then I show up for them. I call to check on them. I text to check on them. I do that sort of thing. Then prayer is a worthwhile endeavor because it reminds me of other people and it causes me in compassion to reach out to other people. And then I love that he added, and I still pray because who knows, I could be wrong. A healthy humility around, like, we just don't know, do we? We don't really know how all these things work, but I do know that I still pray for people I care about. When people I love are sick, I pray for them. I pray for the state of the world. I pray for all sorts of things. Because prayer can be an act of solidarity. It can be a way of showing up. It can be a way of remembering. It can be a way, and there is something to be said for when people know that other people are remembering them in that way, that it does something for them. It encourages them, it strengthens them, it heartens them, it does something to let them know in what I'm going through, as awful as it may be, I am not going through it alone. And y'all, there is something to be said for not going through it alone. Are you with me? Going through it with other people around you, supporting you in an act of solidarity is a gift. Prayer can also be about, when we learn to frame it in this way of being a posture of openness, it can be a way of being heard and a way of hearing. And here's what one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, wrote in her poem, Praying. She said, it doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together, and don't try to make them elaborate. This is not a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. I love a few of these things she said. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. Creation is a wonderful gift, right? And there's something profound about seeing the natural world and all of its beauty that can inspire a kind of awe and gratitude that helps open us up in a way that very few things can. Would you agree? Like, there's something about seeing a sunset and the sky being just perfect. You're like, oh my gosh, I could have been born on Mars and that would have been rough. But I was born on Earth and I get to see this. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I could have not been born at all, and things are tough, but I was born, and I get to experience, I get to put my toes in the sand, which is not so great, but the ocean, my gosh, have you ever been in the ocean? It is the greatest thing maybe on the planet. And it can open us up. But also, I love what she says about this. It could be weeds in a vacant lot. Anybody ever seen weeds in a vacant lot and been like, God, I'm here? No, that's not the thing that generally, but her point is, the next line, if we pay attention, then we never know where we'll find inspiration. If we pay attention, we never know if our posture is what Paul would call pray without ceasing, which we would call maybe just maintaining a sense and state of openness to the divine, to ourselves, to the world around us. You never know what the thing is that will inspire us in profound and beautiful ways. And then she says, it's not a contest, it's a doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. I was talking with a friend a couple weeks ago, and one of the things she was lamenting is that during her deconstruction process, as her faith is unraveled and she's trying to reimagine it, prayer kind of went away for her, and she said, I used to talk to God all the time. I used to just pray, and now I'm like, I do that. I'm like, who in the world's listening to this? Who in the world's hearing me? Is anybody hearing me? Am I just talking to the ceiling? Am I just talking to myself? And I said, well, look, let's just, because she's wrestling with, is there a God? And I just said, look, let's take God off the table for just a minute. If the only thing that happens when you're praying is that you open yourself up to hear from yourself, there is wisdom in you. I mean, what happens when you go to therapy? Like, a therapist's job is not, okay, I am now going to fix you and tell you everything you should do with your life. Get out a pen and paper. Let's get this done right. No, what a therapist does is a therapist creates space for you and I to sort out our stuff. And often, what we need to do comes from, it's already in there. We just haven't been taught how to access it. So what if the worst thing that happens when you pray, when you talk, and maybe you're in your house, in your car, and you're just talking out loud, and maybe there's nobody up there hearing you, but you are somehow unlocking from within you wisdom that you didn't know you already had. Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think it's a gift. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we engage in that practice? Why wouldn't it be something that we'd want to? And let's just say, if talking to God, you believe in God, that talking to God helps you, why would you stop? Regardless of how in the world you think it might work. And if we can just be honest, nobody knows how it all works. Like, how does prayer work? Here are 5 points. Nope. Nobody knows the points. But if it's meaningful to you, and it helps you, and it helps lift the burden, and it helps get things out that need to be gotten out, and if, to Mary Oliver's point, another voice speaks, if that is the voice of God, or if your name's Bob and that is the voice of Bob, if it is leading you toward human flourishing, listen to it. Embrace it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be afraid of it. If it is a voice that is, and this is one of the things I think is important, if it is a voice that is affirming your dignity and your belovedness and is leading you toward human flourishing, then whether it's your voice or God's voice, it is worth being trusted. Are you with me? And I think that is a gift of prayer. And then I think prayer can ultimately be about aligning ourselves with where things are going, with the goodness of the world. Dr. King talked about the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends toward justice. What if prayer is about aligning ourselves a bit with that? I don't know if you've noticed, the world has problems. We saw, again, just this past week in Montgomery, what white supremacy is doing in our country. We see all the time how groups of people with power are using it to leverage and harm people who have no power. There's a lot of work to be done for good in the world. What if prayer was about us saying, we want to align ourselves with that good work? One of my other favorite scholars, John Dominic Crossan, he said, if you imagine God with a metaphor, and can we just pause right there and say this? Every time you talk about God, you're using a metaphor. Every single, that is not 21st century progressive heresy. That goes all the way back to St. Thomas Aquinas, who said, every time we speak of God, we speak by analogy. We cannot say anything about God that isn't comparing God to something we understand, because God is big, God is vast, God is beyond our comprehension. So we have to say God is like in order to, like even saying God is a parent, right? That is a metaphor to explain our relationship with God. It doesn't mean God has a minivan, right? Like, who are all these kids and how do I get a car big enough? To say God, when somebody's like, God is my rock, you don't expect them to go outside and be worshiping a rock. You'd be like, wait, you're taking this way too literally. Right? So when we talk about God being refreshing like a cool drink on a hot day, like we're not actually saying God, you see what I'm doing there? So metaphor is the only way to talk about God. Everybody who speaks about God, from the most fundamentalist Christian to the most liberal whatever, they are talking with metaphor. And so Crossan said, if we use the metaphor of a person, prayer then means talking to a person, and that's great. That's okay. If that metaphor is helpful for you, use it. It doesn't mean that you have to turn in your progressive card because I'm talking to God. It is okay to talk to God. If you don't need my permission, but if you do need permission, you've got it. But that's not the only way to imagine God, to image God. He says, if you imagine God with the metaphor of process, prayer means acting collaboratively with that process. So the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. If we say that God is that process, God is that moral arc of the universe that is long and bends toward, then what prayer could be is us saying we want to align ourselves to work for that future, which stops prayer from being that cop-out, that excuse for not acting, right? It's not like, well, if we got to pick, we're going to pray for hungry people. No, you can actually feed hungry people too. We're going to pray that something would happen with climate change. Well, actually, there's some things we can do about that. Or we want to pray for justice. We want to pray for an end to nationalism, Christian nationalism. We want to pray for gun reform. We want to pray for equality to really be, and equity to really be the thing that's happening in this country. Yes, pray for all of that. But then let that prayer be the way we align ourselves with the process, the way we engage, the way we find our way of participating, because the goal has always been participation. Religion often does is it takes participants and turns them into spectators. You were never intended to spectate. You were never intended to just sit and listen to somebody talk at you and that be the fullness of spirituality. The goal has been that whatever happens with spiritual practice, that it empowers us and enables us to then align ourselves, it's not there anymore, to align ourselves with the process of bringing justice, of bringing heaven to earth. Because heaven's in great shape, earth is where the problems are. Are you with me? And if that's prayer, if prayer is ultimately about trying to line myself up with the movement toward justice, the movement toward love, the movement toward compassion, the movement toward generosity and kindness and healing and wholeness and beauty, I want to be a part of that. Why would I take that and throw it on the scrap heap of former spiritual practice when it could be the thing? Prayer, meditation, silence, whatever. If you want to make up a word for it because all those other words give you a little bit of an itchy feeling, that's okay. Call it what you want. But if it opens your heart, and if it helps you align yourself with where goodness is trying to take creation, then I think it's a valuable, meaningful. See, I told you, we're going to start out cliche, but the goal is to get somewhere meaningful, which is we can reclaim prayer, meditation. We can reclaim it as something transformative, meaningful, and something that actually doesn't take us out of the action, but calls us to be more deeply embedded in the action. Does prayer change things? I guess it depends on what you mean by things. I don't know that sitting around and praying for something solely is ever going to make the world a better place. But if prayer changes us, if prayer can open my eyes to the needs of the world around me, if prayer can open my heart to my neighbor, if prayer can open my heart to my enemy. How many of you have ever prayed for an enemy? It's hard. 10 of 10 or 0 of 10 do not recommend. It's tough. But it's also transformative. I've sort of developed this practice. It sounds creepy, but it's not. You know it's going to be good when you start with it sounds creepy. Sometimes people say mean things to me on the internet. And I've started this practice of when somebody does it on Facebook, instead of just immediately being like, I'm gonna pray for them, like before I do that, I go to their page and I scroll until I find a picture of them with somebody they care about. And I'm like, oh, this is a person. This is a person with feelings and hopes and dreams, and there are people in their life they love. And I'm just guessing if everything were going the way they would hoped it would have gone, they would not be going around leaving ugly comments on other people's Facebook posts. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Like, I think if people are walking around and they got the kind of time and energy to just drag people on Facebook, I'm just guessing that they wouldn't say they're living their best life. And so I look at them and it humanizes them, and it reminds me that they are not that different than I am. Different beliefs, different interpretations, but at the core, we're both human, and we're both looking for things and searching for things and longing for things. And I don't really get to choose whether or not I am someone's enemy, but I do have a choice in whether or not they become mine. And so if that for me is praying for my enemy, not so much with words, but with this act of this discipline, this practice that opens my heart to them in ways. Sometimes I still don't like them at the end of it, but I don't see them as some other non-human entity that's just, I see them as a human being. Can prayer change us? Yeah. And then can we go out into the world and change the world? Yeah. I think the problem has been that while we have been waiting on God, God has always been waiting on us, because God has always been looking for partners. And it's always, to the beautiful song Ricky wrote and sang just before, it's about hands in soil, feet on ground, God looking for partners for the healing, restoration, liberation of every single atom in the cosmos. Are you with me? God has been waiting for us. Perhaps when all the prayers are happening, God's going, yeah, I've been waiting. When's God going to do something about? Yeah, I've been waiting. And so we're going to sing a song in just a minute, and it's going to be this song that has this lyric: Jesus, when are you going to wake up? Anybody have that feeling ever? Jesus, when are you going to wake up? But what if we hear this song through this lens of actually, because Jesus said, I'm going to send you all into the world, and you're going to do better things than I've done. So what if the song is really, as the body of Jesus in the world, the question is not pointed to some invisible figure somewhere else, but it's pointed back at us and saying, when are you going to wake up? When are you going to stop spectating? When are you going to see the invitation to be God's partner in the world, to collaborate with God for the goodness of the world? And so here's what I'd like to do. Instead of me closing with a prayer, just in transition, because sometimes at church, prayers are transitions. We're going to go ahead and invite them up. But I do want to give us just a couple minutes to sit in some painfully awkward silence. And whatever that looks like for you, if it's a close your eyes situation and bow your head, if it's just whatever that looks like, we just want to give a couple minutes of silence for us to sort of just absorb kind of where we've been and open our hearts to the invitation of this next song. So let's just take a couple minutes for that. Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up and calm this raging sea? Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? How can you sleep when we're in need? We could wait for you and hope that you will help, or we could get up and move and do some work ourselves. But Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? This raging sea. Oh Jesus, when you gonna wake up? Oh, when you gonna wake up? How could you sleep when we're in need? Oh, we could wait for you and hope that you will help, or we could up and move and do some work ourselves. Yeah, we could wait for you and hope that you will help, or we could get up and move and do some work ourselves. Oh, Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up and calm this raging sea? Oh Jesus, when you gonna wake up? Yeah, when you gonna wake up and sleep when we're in need? So won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Won't you rise?
Won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Amen. Grace Point, we're so glad that you joined us today. We hope you had a great day, a great service, and that you can leave filled up to go and be all that we've sung about and all that we've talked about today. So we love you. Have a good week. We're proud of you. And we'll be back next week, same time. Thank you. We love you.